The difference between a company that survives and one that disappears may not be innovation. It's the willingness to destroy your own success. Why do billion-dollar companies collapse while other competitors thrive? Kodak invented the digital camera in 1975, but filed for bankruptcy in 2012. Fujifilm faced the exact same market collapse. Both watched film photography die. Only one survived. The difference? Fuji looked at everything they did and pivoted immediately. Your business might be sitting on the next distribution right now, and if you're protecting what you worked on yesterday instead of building what works tomorrow, you're following Kodak's playbook. The companies that win aren't the ones with the best products today. They're the ones willing to kill those products before someone else does. This isn't about pivoting when you fail. It's about pivoting while you're winning. And that was one of the great problems. If you look at it, this is a David and Goliath kind of issue. Kodak, one of the biggest companies in the world, they own their own silver mill and their own cattle ranch because the two most important things for Kodak on film was the silver that reacted and calves for the gelatin that the film was created out of. And then there was Fuji, a small company, but was doing well. And they continued to innovate. But when they saw the digital market come, Kodak thought it was going to take 30 years. It only actually took about 20. And the difference was Fuji immediately says, what do we know? And they knew a lot about emulsions and chemistry. So they said, what else could we use those things for? And they went out and they looked at the most strategic areas that they could. Kodak just kept denying that the digital camera would ever work. In fact, the first set of cameras was a process that took a lot of energy and didn't give very good photographic results. And Kodak said, we don't have to worry about that. So they kept pushing along on analog film, where Fuji said, what can we do? We know a lot about emulsions. And so they created this fabric that they actually use now to put in place for LED televisions. So their major manufacturer went from film to fabric. They also had understanding of lenses. So they started creating lenses for security cameras and things like that. And then when the CCD imaging came out and chips became cheaper, film dropped off. Now, Fuji still actually does a little film, but most of its time is in the fabrics development, in the pharmaceutical development, because remember, they're doing with chemistry, and the imaging when they're doing with medical imaging. So Fuji immediately started to strive, and one of their biggest challenges was they were succeeding so well in film that people kept getting distracted. Luckily enough, they didn't get distracted for long. How many of us have been in a company or watched a company that was a great competitor and now is no longer? If you look at some of the things, some of the great companies of the world, AT&T was bought up by an online company. In fact, many of the major competitors that we saw 25, 30 years ago, one generation, are completely different than they were before. General Electric is a classic example. They've pivoted and pivoted. So as we are starting to increase, as we are starting to grow, as we start to become that important, it's starting to understand, again, understanding that fundamental information. Understanding that a pivot is probably one of the things that we need to be looking out for, and looking at new opportunities to leverage the knowledge we have. One of the greatest opportunities we have is the ability to create knowledge and understand it and bring it into a different area. So for example, when you look at how phones used to exist, one of my favorites was the BlackBerry and the keyboard, and how that BlackBerry and keyboard was brought into, and everyone had lots of buttons until Apple came out with the iPhone. Until a screen is better than a pad, and then a screen is better than a computer, and touch becomes the much more interactive, not because it's easier to do, because it's easier for us to touch something than to type it. Now, that works relatively well in a lot of ways, but not always. Have you ever been in a car and you have a touch screen and you want to go find the volume control for such and such, and it's on a screen so you can't physically feel how that works? It actually doesn't work as well. So what you're finding is that car companies are putting both tactile, stuff that you can touch, and digital, stuff that you can move, in the same car because we like that touch. We've swung the other way. What does that mean for you in the long run? These companies that are big right now, massive companies that are producing lots and lots of material, and one of the biggest companies in the world, may not always be that way. And if your company is growing and hitched its ride onto something that's important, think AI right now, and everyone's teaching AI, that's going to change. Don't know when, but take your information and start looking at how you can provide access to other industries. In our company, we have little tests that we do every year. And sometimes they work really well, and sometimes they don't. But about 2 or 3 times a year, we test out something. We try something else in a different market, we learn something, we go in, we try an experiment, and we may lose money at it, but we also learn if that's something that we can do. It's a quick experiment to say, is that something we got? We've built 2 other companies off of just that idea, that we have information that if we move it into a different industry, we can actually occupy a small part of that industry. And then we evaluate whether we want to grow. And therefore, 2 companies have spun off just doing that in our little company. What can you do? What information can you provide to a different industry to really stabilize yourself, even if you're growing at gangbusters? Because those little tentacles can become life-saving anchors when things change. If everyone's hooking their wagons to one great industry or another, or one great company, when that company falters or new information comes out or a new idea comes out, all of a sudden that company disappears and so do you. To learn from it, even if you're the innovator, even if you were Kodak who developed the digital camera but didn't see the advantage of it, don't be Kodak. Be the little Fuji company that still does cameras, but also does more in fabric manufacture and lining manufacture than anything else. Do you have other examples of people who've pivoted and actually succeeded when other companies thought they were crazy? Put in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and continue the conversation.
Thanks for tuning into today's episode on the Strategy Session, where we take your business from stuck to unstoppable. Here's another video I think you'd enjoy. If you found these insights valuable, remember to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell for notifications on our latest videos. Remember, you're not just marketing, you're making history with Venture Gained.